This is Mrs. Wayner's math class, Chapter 3, Lesson 3B, Order Decimals. Our learning target by the end of the lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can use place value to order decimals. Some important notes for this lesson. When asked to put numbers in order, be sure to look carefully at the directions to see what order they need to be in. Sometimes you'll be told to order numbers from greatest to least. But other times, you'll be told to order from least to greatest. And sometimes you'll be asked a question in a different way, and you'll need to figure out whether or not the question wants the greatest time or the least time. But you definitely want to take the time to look and think about it carefully, because if you do all the work correctly, but list the numbers in the wrong order, your final answer will be wrong. Don't let that happen to you, so always check for the order that's asked. Let's take a look at number 1. It says use the table to solve. 1. Order the distances from school from greatest to least. Who lives the farthest away? Who lives the closest? I look at my table, and the title of my table is Distance from Home to School. I have students and miles. Megan lives 0.56 miles. Maya lives 0.6 miles. Jordan lives 0.509 miles, and Brianna lives 0.523 miles. So what do I need to order numbers? Well, here's what I need to do first. This is a word problem, so I need to go back to the problem to see what they're asking me to do. And the first thing that they're asking me to do is order the distances from greatest to least. The very best way to not get confused, because students get confused on this so easily, is to do a setup for the answer at the beginning, because you're going to get involved in so much work to solve it that you may then forget to put it in the correct order. So I put a setup, and I say I need to order from greatest to least, so I'm going to write down a G because that's what I want my first number to be. I see how many numbers I'll be ordering. In this case, I have 4 numbers, so I'll do 4 lines. This line will be the greatest. Then the one after that, and my 4th line, I'll label L for least. So that will remind me of the correct order to put the numbers in before I get started with all that work. But I do notice that this question has more than one thing that I need to do, or more than one task. So the next question asks me, who lives the farthest away? Well, would the person who lives the greatest distance away live the farthest away? Or would the person who lives the least distance away live the farthest away? That's right, whoever lives the greatest distance away will live the farthest away. So next to that farthest, next to greatest, I'm going to write who to remind myself I need to know who that person is. And the last task, the question says, who lives the closest? Whoever lives the closest, do they live the greatest distance or the least distance? Well, if you live closer, you live a shorter distance, so you'll live least distance. So I'm going to write who next to the least because I need to know that person as well. Now I'm ready to go ahead and order my numbers. I do this very similarly to the way I compared numbers in the last lesson, which was lesson 3A. First, I take the first given number and write it down. So here's my first number, and I'm going to write that down. 0.56. Now I'm going to take every other number and write it down, but I'm going to line it up by the decimals have to be on top of each other. So again, for the sake of the video, I'm going to use the colors so that you see how I do it. But this is the way you should do it with your pencil. Next, I look at my next number, I focus in on the decimal, and I write the decimal under the first decimal. I focus in on the digits to the left of the decimal. In this case, it's a 0, so I write a 0 to the left of the decimal. I focus in on the digits to the right of the decimal. In this case, it's a 6, so I write a 6 to the right of the decimal. Now I'm going to check to make sure I have even numbers. So look in the top row, 0 and 0. Good, there's a number for each column. There's a digit on the top and the bottom here. And there's a digit on the top here, but there is not a digit on the bottom. So I need to fill in that place value 0, and I underline the place value 0. Underlining it is very important in this ordering of numbers, because when you give me the final answer, you cannot have the extra zeros in there. It has to be the original number. So by putting that place value of 0 with a line under it, I will know later on that that was a 0 I added in. Okay, let's move on and check the next number. So in Jordan's number, I focus in on the decimal and put the decimal directly underneath the other decimals. To the left of the decimal, I have a 0, so to the left of the decimal, I'll write a 0. To the right of the decimal, I have a 5, 0, 9, so I will write down 5, 0, 9. Now I need to focus in and make sure my columns are equal. 3 digits, that's good. 3 digits, that's good. 3 digits, that's good. But I do not have 3 digits here. So I need to fill in my place value 0 so that I have 3 digits on top of each other. So I'll put a place value 0, remember to underline it so I can remove it later, and that place value 0. Now all of my columns have 3 digits. I can move on to Brianna's number next. So now I look at Brianna's number and I find the decimal, so I write the decimal right underneath the other decimals. I look at the left of the decimal and I see 0, so I'll put a 0. To the right of the decimal I see a 5, 2, 3, so I'll write down a 5, 2, 3. Now I check to make sure that all of my columns are equal. 4 digits here, 4 digits here, 4 digits here, 4 digits here. All of my columns are equal. I have written all of the numbers from my chart. There were 4, I wrote 4, so now I'm ready to compare. And again, just like comparing, when I compare, I start with my left column and work my way to the right. I can only compare if numbers are different. So in the first column, I notice that we have 0, 0, 0, 0. They're all the same, so I cannot compare. In the second column, we have a 5, 6, 5, and 5. I see that one of those digits is different. That's the 6. And is 6 greater than 5 or less than 5? Well, 6 is greater than 5, so this will be my greatest number. Therefore, I will take this number and write it on my line for the greatest number right up here. However, when I write it down on these lines, on these answer lines, I am only going to write the digits that were originally there. So I am not going to write my place value zeros. Therefore, I'll write everything that is not underlined. So I have 0, decimal, 6, because those next two zeros are underlined. Now I'll keep going to look for the other numbers. But first, so that I don't get confused, I'll cross out the number that I've already written, because that's not part of the mix anymore. Now I go back and I look at this column again, because I did not use all of the numbers, and I see 5, 5, and 5. Well, all of those numbers are the same, so I cannot compare those numbers with this column. So I move on to the next column, and I see 6, 0, and 2. Those numbers are different. Since I'm ordering from greatest to least, I'm going to look for the greatest of those digits. What's greater, 6, 0, or 2? That's right, it's 6. So that's the number that I will write down next. Remember, when I copy it, I'll be copying it without the place value zeros. So I will copy 0, decimal, 5, 6. And I will cross that number out because I'm done with that number. I go back down over here to look at my last two numbers, and we said the 5s weren't good, but 0 and 2 are different, and I can compare 0 and 2. So which one is larger? I'm going from greatest to least, so I'm going to look for which one's the greater of the numbers. What's greater, 0 or 2? That's right, 2 is greater, so this will be the number that gets written over here. I'll write my number without any of the place value zeros. Although this one doesn't seem to have any place value zeros in it at all, so I can copy 0, decimal, 5, 2, 3. I cross it out since I just used it, and I have one number left, which I will write on my last line. 0, decimal, 5, 0, 9. I can cross that one out to see that I have answered the first part of the question. It said order the distances from school from greatest to least, and here I have them ordered. My next question, the green question, said who lives the farthest away? So who had the score 0.6 or 0 and 6/10? Here's the score right there. So that would be Maya. So Maya lives the farthest away. My final question asks who lives the closest. So I look down at the purple who right over here, and it says my number is 0.509 or 0 and 509 thousandths. So I have to look on my chart and see who has that distance. It's right there, so that is Jordan. Therefore, Jordan lives the closest. So I have now answered all parts of this question. I've ordered the distances from school from greatest to least. I've told who lives the farthest away, which is Maya, and I've told who lives the closest, which is Jordan. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Let's take a look at example number 2. Example number 2 says order the numbers from least to greatest. So go back to my question. I need to know least to greatest. I'm going to set myself up for my answer. I need to start with least, so I'll write my L. I notice they have 5 numbers, so I'll put 5 lines. First one next to my L, because that will be my least. 2, 3, 4, 5, and the greatest will be on the 5th line. So that will order me from least to greatest. Next thing I do is write down my first number, which is 10.50. And again, for the sake of the video, I'm going to line them up, lining up my decimals, and I'll show you in the colors so that you see which one I'm focusing on. So I find my decimal and I put it under the other decimal. To the left of the decimal I have a 0, I'll write a 0. To the right of the decimal I have 500, so I'll write 500. I check to make sure my columns are equal. This first column only has 1 digit and it should have 2, so I put a place value 0 and underline it. Next column has 2, that's good, 2, that's good, 2, that's good. This column only has 1, so I put a place value 0 and underline it. I'm ready to move on to my next number. I look at my next number, here's the decimal, line it up under the other decimals. To the left I have a 0, write down a 0. To the right I have 0, 5, 0, so write down 0, 5, 0. I check to make sure I have even amount of digits. In this column I have 2, I need 3, so I'll add that place value 0 with an underline. I have 3 here, that's good, 3 here, that's good, 3 here, that's good, and 3 here, that's good. So I'm ready to move on to the next number. Okay, so for the next number, I locate the decimal, I put it under the other decimals. To the left of the decimal, I have a 1, so to the left, I'll write a 1. To the right, I have 0, 5, 0, so to the right, I'll write 0, 5, 0. Check to make sure I have an even number of digits. In the first column, I have 3, but I should have 4, so I'll put a 0 and underline it. The next column I have 4, that's good, 4, that's good, 4, that's good, and 4, that's good. So I'm ready to move on to my last number. Once again, I find my decimal, line it up. To the left of the decimal I have a 0, so I'll write a 0. To the right of the decimal I have 0, 0, 5, so I write 0, 0, 5. I make sure my columns are equal. There's 4 digits here and there should be 5, so I'll add a place value 0. 5 digits here, 5 digits here, 5 digits here, 5 digits here. So I'm ready to go ahead and compare. Let's highlight that first column. I see a 1 and 0, 0, 0, 0, so there is one and only one digit that's different, and that's the 1. Since it's the only digit that's different, I'm going to say to myself, is 1 greater than 0 or is 1 less than 0? Well, 1 is greater than 0. So this answer is going to go in the greatest line, which is all the way down here at the bottom. And I'll copy the number, but I will not copy place value zeros that are underlined. So I have 1, 0, decimal, 5, 0, and I skip that last 0. All the numbers that are left in this first column are zeros. They're all the same. You cannot compare when they're all the same. So now I move to the next column. I have 0, 0, 1, and 0. I have a digit that's different, and that's the 1. Is 1 greater than 0 or less than 0? it's greater than 0, so it's going to go on the next greatest line. So it's going to go right down here, the next greatest line that's available. And I'll copy the number without the place value zeros. First digit is a place value, I ignore it. So I'm going to write 1.050. And now I'm ready to move on. Cross out the number I just used. I have 3 numbers left. So I look at those 3 numbers in that second column, they're all zeros. Can't compare when they're all the same, so I have to move over to that tenths column, the third column over. I have a 5, 0, 0, and I see one digit that's different. That's the 5. Is 5 greater than 0 or less than 0? Well, 5 is greater than 0, so this will be my next greatest number. It's going to go right here. That's the number that's available, the line available that's closest to the greatest. Okay, so I'm going to write down this number, but not writing the zeros that I underlined. So I write 0.500. Cross out the number that I just used. I have 2 numbers left. And when I look at that tenths column, they're both zeros. When they're both the same digit, I cannot compare, so I move over to the hundredths column. I say I have a 5 and a 0. They're different, I can compare. The first digit that I saw was a 5, and is 5 greater than or less than 0? Well, it's greater than 0, so it's going to go in this next greatest line, the next greatest line that's available, I should say. And I'm going to write down what I see. 0.050. Remember, I do not write the place values that I underlined. Cross out the number I used, and I only have 1 number left. That is going to be my least number that goes on the line. The first 0 is a place value 0. I don't write it, so I write 0.005. And now I have followed what the directions have asked me to do. I have ordered my numbers from least to greatest. I am finished with this problem. This is my final answer. Please stop and complete worksheet number 2 right now. Remember to show all of the steps. My final example is example number 3. It says use the table to complete number 3. 3. The blue and green groups had a race. The times of the fastest runners were posted. Who won the race? So I look at my table and it says there's a 1-mile race. We have the runners and the time in minutes. Matt finished in 4.32 minutes. Emmett finished in 4.309 minutes. Jack finished in 4.9 minutes. Rashad finished in 4.099 minutes. And Billy finished in 5 minutes. So in order to find who won the race, I need to order these numbers. The question is, will I order the numbers from least to greatest or greatest to least? Well, my question wants to know who won the race. And is the winner of a race the person who has the longest or the greatest time? Or is the winner of the race the person who has the shortest or the least time? Think about that in a race. If you win, do you want to have the least time that you ran or the greatest amount of time that you ran? That's right, to win a race, you would want the least amount of time. So sometimes you'll have tricky questions like this. You do need to make sure you think it out, and logically, the person who finishes the fastest has the least time, and that's the winner of the race. So therefore, I'm going to set myself up to order my numbers from least to greatest. So I'll write my L, and I see that there are 5 runners, so here's the first one. I'm going to put a star by this to remind myself if I want to know who won the race, this is the spot that I want to know the least time. 2, 3, 4, 5. And that will be the first number that I write down is Matt's, which is 4.32. Now I want to write down the next time, which is Emmett's time. Again, I'll use my colors for the sake of the video. I look at Emmett's time. I see the decimal, I put it under the other decimal. To the left of the decimal I see a 4, so I write down my 4. To the right of the decimal I see 309, 309. Check to make sure my columns are even. 2 digits here, 2 digits here, 2 digits here, only 1 digit here, so I'll add my place value 0 and underline it. Now I'll look at Jack's time. So I have my decimal, I put it under the other decimals. To the left is a 4, I write the 4. To the right is a 9, I write the 9. Check my columns, 3 digits good, 3 digits good, only 2 digits, so I need the place value 0. Only 2 digits, so I need the place value 0. And I'm ready to move on to the next number. I'm ready to focus on Rashad's number. There's my decimal, write it down under the other decimals. To the left I have a 4, to the left I write a 4. To the right I have 0, 9, 9, so I write 0, 9, 9 to the right. Check to make sure my columns are even. 4 digits, 4 digits, 4 digits, 4 digits, the columns are even. I'm ready to move on to Billy's number, my last number. Okay, I look at Billy's number to find the decimal, and I don't see a decimal. But we know, even if we don't see it, it's always there. We just have to remove the invisibility cloak. And when I remove an invisibility cloak, the decimal is always at the end. Let's remove it, and there's my decimal. I see the decimal, I write down a decimal under the other decimals. To the left of the decimal is a 5, so to the left I write down to a 5. To the right there's nothing, so I don't write anything. I'm ready to check to make sure my columns are even. This first column, I see 5 digits, that's good. The next column I only see 4 digits, so I need to add a place value 0 here. Next column I only see 4 digits, so I need to add a place value 0 there. And the last column I only see 4 digits, so I need to add the place value 0 there. Now I'm ready to compare. I always start on the left side, so I'll highlight that left side. I see 4, 4, 4, 4, and 5. Oh, I see one digit that's different. Is that different number, the 5, is that greater than 4 or less than 4? It's greater than 4, so it's going to go down in the greatest column at the bottom. So I'll write down the 5, and I don't write down the place value zeros. Let's cross out the number that I just used, because that's no longer in the running. And I go back and look at the numbers that I am using, and they're all 4s, they're all the same, I can't compare, so I have to move to the next column, the tenths column. I see a 3, a 9, and a 0. Well, what are the digits that stand out as being different? The 9 and the 0 are different than the 2 3s. So here's my question. Which one do I want to focus on, the 9 or the 0? Well, I am looking for the least number here. The star says the L for the least number. And out of all the digits listed, the 3, the 9, and the 0, which one is the least? That's right, it's a 0. So I can transfer this number right up to here, 4.099. I have now found the least number, because remember that 0 is less than 9 and it's less than 3. And since I want to know who won the race, which is the person who ran in the least amount of time, I actually have my answer to this question, and I don't need to find out anything else. So the question wants to know who won the race, not what the fastest time was. So I have to look back at my chart and see who had the 4.099. There it is. And that person is Rashad. So I have the answer to my question. Rashad won the race, and that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 3 right now. Let's review. When asked to put numbers in order, to be sure to look carefully at the directions to see what order they need to be in. Sometimes you'll be told to order numbers from greatest to least, but other times you'll be told to order from least to greatest. And sometimes you'll need to figure out which order that you need. For the case of who won the race, you needed to figure out whether the winner of a race is the least amount of time or the greatest amount of time. And we knew that that was the least amount of time, so you always need to think it out logically. And remember, even if you do all the work correctly but list the numbers in the wrong order, your answer will be wrong. You don't want to let that happen to you, so definitely think what the question is asking. Remember, when lining up your numbers, you must line up the decimal numbers, then fill in whatever's to the left of the decimal, whatever's to the right of the decimal, lining up those columns as well. Then you must check and fill in any place value zeros so that all of your columns are even. Finally, when you go to compare, you start on the left and you can only compare when the numbers are different. In this case, the 1 was different. We realized that it was the largest number, so that got written on the line, the line for the greatest number. And when we write the number down, we do not write the underlined place value zeros. We were finished with that number. All the rest was zeros, so we couldn't compare. So we looked at the next column, and we saw that the 1 was different. It was greater, so we knew that that got written over here on this line, again, without writing down the underlined zeros. We finished with that. All we had left was zeros, so we moved to the next column where we had a 5, a 0, a 0. 5 was different, and that was the greatest, so we wrote that number down over here. Crossed it out because we were finished with it. Our two numbers that were left had zeros. They're the same. We can't compare, so we moved over to the next column. We had a 5 and a 0. We said 5 is larger, so that was the number that got written on this line. Crossed it out because we were done with it, and our final number got written over here. We then answer the question by numbering the orders from least to greatest. As in example number 1, sometimes in addition to ordering from least to greatest to least, they may ask you a question with this information, like who lives the farthest? So that would be the greatest distance. Or who lives the closest? That would be the least distance. And again, sometimes in example number 3, they're asking a question and you need to figure out whether that's the least or the greatest for whatever the numbers are. If all they're asking is one specific question and they don't tell you to order the numbers, once you find that answer, just like we did in number 3, you don't have to finish ordering the whole thing from least to greatest to least, because once you've found your answer, you can go ahead and answer your question. So hopefully after this lesson and some practice, you will confidently be able to say, I can use place value to order decimals. Please make sure you follow all the steps because it gets a little time consuming, not hard, a little time consuming, but following the steps ensures that we get the correct answer. Good luck with this lesson.